Welcome back to the Right Future YouTube show. Today, we are going to focus for the first time, and I'm sure there will be many more of these to come, on what will be the focus of the next 2 years of the Biden administration. With Republicans in control of the House, we're going to see a lot of what we saw in 2019 and 2020 from Trump and the Trump administration. When the party in power loses one or both chambers of Congress, especially the House of Representatives, which again is what happened in 2017 with Trump, and is what happened now, even though it was for Biden, which was barely, it's a small majority. The party in power, in this case, the Biden administration, is going to focus on confirming judges, especially to appellate courts. The Court of Appeals, the layer below the Supreme Court. Now, we had two peaches recently. One, Michael Delaney, a nominee for the First Circuit Court of Appeals, which is New England. So he's got a long history, and the first Republican to question or to make a statement is Lindsey Graham. Chuck Grassley was not there. He recently had hip surgery, I believe, so he's in Iowa recovering. So Lindsey Graham was the senior member of the Judiciary Committee for Republicans, and he's the first one there. And I'm a nerd. I'm a geek. It's why I created this channel. I watch these hearings. I live for these hearings, especially the judiciary hearings on judicial nominations, because judicial nominations are so important to the country, right? Democrats have said for years what they value the most in judicial nominees is, do you have empathy and do you care about public opinion, which is supposed to have nothing to do with what Supreme Court justices, what judges in the appellate court and the circuit courts do, right? They're supposed to they wear the black robe because they're supposed to put their emotions and their personal beliefs in the back, and they're only supposed to judge based on the law, right? Does this law fit within the current legal statute, the current legal circuit? Does it fit within Supreme Court precedent? Does it fit within the United States Constitution? So that's how Republicans see it, right? We see it as, we're called constructionists, originalists, right? We say, do the words on the page have meaning? We want to know, does this law mean what it says, and does it fit with the original meaning of the Constitution? And that is something Democrats don't care about. In this first one, so going back to Lindsey Graham, he starts, and it's just a normal hearing at this point, right? Chairman Durbin talks, and then it goes to Graham. And Lindsey Graham brings up former New Hampshire Senator Kelly Ayotte, who is somebody he was close with back in the time when Kelly Ayotte was there. Kelly Ayotte was part of the three amigos. At first, it was Graham, McCain, and Lieberman, a Democrat turned independent. And then Lieberman retired, and Kelly Ayotte came in 2011 from New Hampshire. And she filled that void. It's mainly a foreign policy thing. And she was narrowly defeated in 2016 by, at the time, the current governor, Maggie Hassan, in what was a contest between two popular statewide candidates. The governor won, the senator lost, and it was by, I believe, 1,006 votes. So it was real tight. And that's still one of the hardest losses I've had to take. So Lindsey Graham is talking, and he doesn't bring up the court case, the case that I'm going to bring up, which absolutely disqualifies this dude, Michael Delaney, from being on the First Circuit Court of Appeals. Absolutely disqualifies him. He brings up Kelly Ayotte. Kelly Ayotte recommended him to the Republican, recommended him to the Judiciary Committee, and they had worked together. They were both attorney generals of New Hampshire at different times. It's an appointed position. And they had both worked together early in their legal careers when they were prosecutors. And Lindsey Graham's talking about this, and I'm like, all right, this guy's not too bad. Because, personally, I trust Kelly Ayotte, Senator Ayotte. Maybe too much. And so this goes on, and then they go right to a Republican, which is odd because they normally alternate. Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican. Democrats have the majority in the United States Senate, so you'd go Chairman Graham, the ranking member, or Chairman Durbin, the ranking member, and then Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican. They went straight to a Republican. That's weird. And they bring up this case from St. Paul's in New Hampshire, which is an elite of the elite prep school in New Hampshire. All kinds of people throughout United States history in big government positions and highly elite positions come from this school in New Hampshire. So there's this situation, and it is something that is known as the Senior Salute, which is a game that seniors play, and the winner gets to have sex with a freshman. That's odd. I mean, does the freshman know for the most part? It's a little odd. Especially in today's, it's not been that long ago. Just odd in that, the school knows about this and doesn't try and stop it. So, there's this one case where Chessie Prout, a 15-year-old freshman, was, we can say this now, sexually assaulted by a senior. This senior was acquitted of felony rape, but was convicted of multiple sexual assault charges, including 18 years old, endangering a minor. So sexual assault convictions and the conviction of endangering a minor. The school has done nothing about the Senior Salute. They know about it. This guy, Michael Delaney, is right now, in this scenario, in this situation, he's in private practice and he represents schools all over the state. And look, I'm a constitutionalist. I'm somebody who supports the John Adams philosophy on defendants. Every defendant deserves a vigorous defense. But this guy is trying to strip this 15-year-old girl who is requesting anonymity in court. She's requesting to use a pseudonym and be called Jane Doe in court so she's not outed at her new school and a victim of more bullying and more threats. And this guy is the attorney for the school, and he agrees to the parents' request as long as the judge also puts a gag order on this 15-year-old girl and her family. Oof. So this guy is getting grilled by Republican after Republican, and it's weird. And eventually, Ted Cruz brings up, no Democrat shows up. All of a sudden, after Ted Cruz speaks, one Democrat showed up. And by the way, the party in power, whether they're in the majority in the Senate or not, so the party of the White House, those people always show up for these nominees because it's their job to defend the nominee of their party. They don't. All of a sudden, Mazie Hirono, a senator from Hawaii, shows up. Now, on the crazy scale, Mazie Hirono breaks the scale. She's certifiably insane. Like, boop, 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 boop. She shows up and she asks a question about, like, can you give us a definition of anonymity and why some defendants want it and why some don't? But, of course, ignoring the fact that this was a 15-year-old child who at this civil litigation had turned 16. So she's still a minor. Now, again, this is the party of empathy, Democrats. Nominating this dude who tried to out this 15-year-old girl. Now 16 at the time. And Jessie, the 16-year-old girl, said, screw it. I'll go forward with my name. Her parents and the lawyers removed the request to go with anonymous names. And this dude's just getting pummeled correctly, right? Like, this dude should get whacked in this hearing. He should be removed. Like, this dude doesn't belong on the appellate court. It's outrageous that he's even nominated. He tried to he outed a 16-year-old girl who was sexually assaulted in a school. And he's defending the school. And again, the school deserves a rigorous defense. But you don't have to out a 16-year-old girl to do a defense. Like, it's just outrageous. And then there's a second one that happened the same day. Oh yeah, so going back, the Democrats didn't show up. It's like they had no interest in taking part in that hearing. They didn't want to have to ask this dude questions. They wanted none of it. They were like, yeah, we'll just wash our hands of this. I guarantee you every single one of those Democrats on the Judiciary Committee will vote for this man on the Senate, in the Judiciary Committee and on the Senate floor. The question is, will Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin stand up and go, nah, this is a bridge too far, we ain't going to take it? Because Maggie Hassan, who is the senator, and Jeanne Shaheen, the other senator from New Hampshire, who call themselves moderates, gave blue slips, meaning they approved of this nomination from their state, and they introduced this dude. So these moderates in the Democratic Party, not so moderate, perfectly fine with this dude being on the U.S. Court of Appeals. So the same day this dude leaves, they bring in the next set for new hearings. Her name is Marion Gaston. She's being appointed to a federal court in Southern District of California. Whew. This lady doesn't believe that registered sex offenders should have to live away from areas where schools or where kids congregate. She advocated and advocates for the repeal of the laws that demand that these sex offenders have to live in on a sex offender registry, have to live a pretty decent distance away, saying that leads to homelessness. By the way, she calls one study, of course it was a far left study, like, for the most part, nobody wants to live around a whole bunch of sex offenders. So that lowers the value of where these people live. So that lowers the value of how expensive it is to live there. So these people are living in areas that are cheap to live in. And she's saying in this study that it leads to homelessness, which is certifiable. And then later on, this is from Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham asks her, does she believe that sex offenders should have to be in a registry? And she does the typical nominee garbage where, if that is the law of the land, if confirmed, I am legally obligated to institute the law as written, and that is the law, so that's what I'll do. She wouldn't answer the question. He asks it again. Yes, but it's important. He said it's important to me. I want to know your opinion. And she sits there quietly and doesn't speak. And then he asks it again and says, are you going to answer the question? She doesn't speak. Chairman Durbin goes, oh, your time is expired. And he goes, okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I yield back my time because I was Mike. She didn't answer the question. Do you believe there should be a registry for sex offenders? Which is an answer in itself, isn't it? She's saying she doesn't think that sex offenders should have to be in a registry. She doesn't believe that sex offenders should have to be away from your children. She thinks that sex offenders should be able to live across from a school. This is a person who the Biden administration is trying to put on a court. Now, these are two examples. There's many examples of Biden administration picking complete far left radicals to go on the court in the court system. Now, we should have had a majority in the Senate. We were expected to have a Republican wave. So there are two reasons, two people who are to blame for these kind of crazies being put on the court. And Delaney, there's a chance he's not if both Sinema and Manchin step up and don't hold your breath. These moderates, don't hold your breath that they're going to stand up for victims of sexual assault, especially Chessie Prout and people like and young girls and boys like Chessie Prout. One is Joe Biden, right? President Biden. He's nominating these people. He's supposed to be a moderate, like he's supposed to be the sane part of the Democrat Party. And he's nominating these kind of crazies. The second person is, I've generally avoided the criticism here so far. But as in my first video, my introduction video, I told y'all this was coming. It's Donald Trump. If it's not for Donald Trump, if after Donald Trump lost in 2020, he did what he promised and just exited stage right and went to live in Finland and built Trump Tower in Finland, we'd have a Republican majority in the United States Senate. There were two Senate seats up that should have been, regardless of what happened in Pennsylvania, just locked flips. One in Georgia, one in Arizona. But Donald Trump is not a person who has a political core. He's not a person that has policy principles. He's not a person that will stand up for something. He is a narcissist. He stands for Trump. Plain and simple. So, he endorses candidates who lied that the election was stolen in 2020. It wasn't. There was zero evidence. 2,000 Mules is as trash as it gets. They undermine the own theme of that movie. It's made by a person who is convicted of who pled guilty to felony fraud charges under the Trump administration. A conservative dude under the Trump administration pled guilty to fraud. Now Trump pardoned him, but he still pled guilty. He made this movie. It's a fiction movie. Like, this isn't about 2,000 Mules. But Trump was willing to say, I don't care if you voted for impeachment, which is, by the way, Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania did. Everybody knows he was going to run for governor last year in 2022. Everybody knows it. He voted for impeachment. Trump was going to go out and make sure he did not get the Republican nomination for governor. So because of that, the person who did get the Republican nomination for governor of Pennsylvania was mini Trump, bald Trump. And he got blasted by 15 points. Why? Because he's nuts. And that took out Mehmet Oz, who may or may not have won. But if in a normal year, even if the Democrat governor wins, the Democrat wins by 5 or 6 points, the Republican Senate candidate in that kind of environment where you don't have the extremist label, which got hung around all Republicans' neck, whether you bought into the lie that the 2020 election was stolen or not, Republicans would have won that seat. But regardless, even with that loss, we should have flipped Arizona. We should have flipped Georgia. Those are down ballot Republican states without question. But Trump wanted acolytes in there. So he endorsed Blake Masters in Arizona over a person who had won 2 terms statewide for Attorney General and Mark Brnovich. This dude signed onto the petition for the Texas petition to throw out Arizona and Pennsylvania's electoral college votes. And then Georgia, we had a ready-made, fantastic choice for United States Senate. Harold Melton had announced in February that he was retiring from the Georgia State Supreme Court. He was 55 years old in July, at the end of that term. That's clear. The year before an election, he's saying, hey, I'm running for United States Senate. He was a campaign lawyer for Sonny Perdue, still the most popular politician in the state of Georgia. When Sonny Perdue got elected, he put Harold Melton on the state Supreme Court. Sonny Perdue's successor, Nathan Deal, makes him Chief Justice. This guy is a shoo-in to beat Raphael Warnock in the flip. Shoo-in. Even if not him, former Republican Congressman, Jack Kingston, is a Trump supporter. Let that guy run. Instead, Trump went to Texas and recruited Herschel Walker, who ran an awful campaign, who Republicans in Georgia probably would have tried to defeat in a primary if they thought they could. But at the time, everybody just assumed that Trump's endorsement was gold, even in Georgia. And people thought Brian Kemp was going to lose in the primary. People thought Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger was going to lose in the primary. By the way, they both won, and they both romped the re-election. The only Republican to lose statewide in Georgia was Trump's Herschel Walker. He would not have been in the race no matter what he said. He was not leaving the state of Texas to go to Georgia to run for the Senate. And in Arizona, of the statewide candidates, 2 candidates won statewide. 2. Both of them were not endorsed by Donald Trump. One of them was the state secretary, or the state superintendent of education, I think is what the title is. And he was that before. He was scandal-ridden. Barely won. The other is a Doug Ducey clone, a female Asian version of Doug Ducey, who Donald Trump went after. He's one of the most conservative governors in the country. He did a brilliant job running the state, but again, since he wouldn't lie and say the 2020 election was stolen, and he certified the election in Arizona, which is his legal obligation to do, Donald Trump went on a rampage and tried to defeat this dude. And stopped him from running for the Senate. He would have won it too. And he wanted to run because he had presidential ambitions in 2024. Probably vice presidential ambitions. But he wanted to run for president in 2024. It's easier to do that from the United States Senate than a retired governor. He would have won. Easily. But Kimberly Yee tried to run for governor. She got out because she couldn't get traction against Kari Lake. She runs for re-election as treasurer, wins by 15 points, wins Maricopa County easily. So what is it? What's the story in Arizona and Georgia? Republicans are popular. Trump Republicans aren't. And because those two states, Trump had to have people who had his back and wouldn't lie about the election over the country and the Republican Party's back. We lost those two seats, and now people like these nuts are going to be in the judiciary. They're going to be judges. That's what we got. And these people are going to have lifetime appointments. In the court, you get a lifetime appointment. So, thanks, Donald Trump, for, again, screwing over the Republican Party. Like you did in 18, like you did in 20, and you hurt us in 22, and you're going to hurt us for decades to come, as hundreds of these appointments are going to be made over the next year, 2 years. Because that's all they got. They're not going to get much legislation through a Republican House, so all the Senate really has to focus on are these appointments. And unless Sinema and Manchin stop people like this, we're going to have Donald Trump to thank for these people getting through. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you on the next one.